Everybody, we are back in open session, and I will entertain a motion to consider the consent agenda.
I motion we consider the consent agenda.
I second.
Discussion. We have discussion, because I know I want to discuss. Does anybody else want to discuss anything in the consent agenda?
A big thanks to all of our summer cleaners and staff working in the buildings to get them all tuned up for next year. It's a lot of work in some warm buildings, I'm sure. So very thankful for them.
And this is the busiest season for repairs. This is when
is.
all the repairs
Everything
happen over.
happens now,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, in a very short amount of time, so I know George and Sam aren't here, but thank them for their staffs too.
I would like to just make a point of showing off a couple pages from the financial reports, which we look at every month, but which I don't expect the community looks at terribly closely because this stuff has numbers with many zeros at the end, so your eyes glaze over. But this, if you can zoom in, is very important, and we look at this every month. And the other thing we look at every month is this. And what these two pages show are the cash balance at the end of every month in the school district over the course of several years. And if you look at the first drawing, you'll see that there are these lovely predictable peaks roundabout in August and roundabout in March, which is when all of us have to pay our real estate taxes. So your property tax bill comes in the mail. Ooh, God, mine came today. And we have until whatever the date is, August 17th, to pay it.
And July, maybe?
July 17th, sorry. Yes, my brain is gone. My brain seems to go a lot these days. So this rise in every year's cash balances represents the influx of property taxes. And then we spend that money down over the next 6 months, and then we get another bolus of cash from the next payment of real estate taxes. And then we try not to spend it all down because we know that we've got to wait until the following year to get the next influx of cash. This is one of the basic principles of school financing, is that we have to hold on to our cash balances in order to tide us over until the next influx.
Molly, just as a reference, that's page 6
Page
in the
6,
document
yes.
that is in board docs.
Of the financial reports,
Yep.
letter D sub 1. The second page is the cash balance at the end of each fiscal year, starting in fiscal year 2014, going into last fiscal year. And you can see that there was a nadir in fiscal year 19, 20, and 21, where we had much less money at the end of the fiscal year. And then all of a sudden, in fiscal year 22, we get this lovely big mountain that shows up. I mean, I'm oversimplifying this, but that's the revenue from the most recent levy, right? We voted on that levy. Well, it didn't pass the first time. It passed the second time in November of 2020. The money didn't show up until fiscal year 22, so that's 21, 22, right? Because the payments are offset. The first year we get half a year's revenue, and then we get the full year's revenue the following year. These are cycles that are not of our making. This is the system that we live under and that we must follow. So when the State House says things like, oh, school districts are sitting on heaps of cash, we need to make them return that money to property owners, they are deliberately ignoring the fact that they created this system and that we have no choice but to follow it. And if we did not save our pennies for when those in-between times, we wouldn't be able to make payroll. I mean, it's really that simple. And 80% of our budget is payroll, right? We pay people to work with our children. So, and then the last thing that I wanted to point out was you can see that they're overlaying mountains. Each one of those fiscal years is up and down, and it actually correlates to the revenue from tax levies, which we have voted on and approved. The state is trying to change what happens to money that has already been voted on, and they are removing, or they're attempting to remove, local control over the funding mechanism that they created. So, that's it for me.
In
did
front
want-
to home rule.
Home rule, exactly.
I have one question regarding the advancement of funds. Does that mean it's from, so for the next fiscal year? Is that where the advancement comes from?
Yes, so no fund can end the year in a negative. And so
Okay.
especially for mostly federal and state grant funds, we have to spend first and ask for the reimbursement. So there will come a time at the end of the fiscal year where some of those funds are in a deficit.
Got it,
We have to
okay.
advance from the general fund, and then the first thing we do in July is return the advances back to the general fund from the
Got
grants.
it. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about the consent agenda? Nope. Then Mr. Gaynor.
Ms. Serini,
Yes.
Mr. Trimble,
Yes.
Ms. Crenshaw,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Before we move forward, I want to acknowledge 2 new administrative hirings and changes that were approved by the board tonight. First, I'm pleased to introduce Ms. Courtney Gardner, who will be an assistant principal at Heights High School.
Welcome.
Ms. Gardner served for 4 years as a principal in the Cleveland City Schools and at Constellation Schools, and as a high school teacher for 6 years in Lorain County. So we look forward to welcoming
Welcome.
Ms. Gardner to Heights High. And although she wasn't able to join us tonight, I also want to acknowledge Ms. Elisa Levy, who will be the Monticello Middle School's new assistant principal. Ms. Levy most recently served for 9 years as a principal and assistant principal in the Cleveland City Schools and as a middle school teacher for 15 years in Euclid. We look forward to welcoming Ms. Levy to Monticello.
Wonderful.
Excellent.
So I think now, Dr. Lombardo,
Oh, yes, sorry.
it's your turn.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
A couple things to do tonight. The first on the agenda is the final reading of Policy Group E. There are 3 policies there, student supervision and welfare. This would be the final reading where you would take action if there are no questions.
And these are 3 policies that are essentially the same, but they pertain to different groups of adults.
That's correct.
Any questions?
No.
Okay. Mr. Gaynor, please.
You know,
Well,
Oh, I
I
need
I
to-
move
I'm
that
sorry.
we, I move that we approve the policies that have been presented.
Second.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Gaynor.
All right, Mr. Trimble,
Yes.
Ms. Crenshaw,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis, Ms.
Yes.
Serini.
Yes.
All right, and I'm happy to say that our 5 unions have ratified the contracts for 3 years. This is exciting news to get this done. We do have to approve these separately, so I'll go ahead and read each resolution topic, and then we can go from there, okay? So the first one is a resolution to approve the tentative agreement between Cleveland Heights, University Heights City Schools Board of Education and the Cleveland Heights Teachers Union, Local 795, effective July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2028.
May I have a motion to consider this resolution, please?
I motion we consider the resolution.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just glad it's done. Glad it's done, glad it's done, and glad it's done as early as it was.
I'm excited that we have a new contract in place before the end
Yes.
of the current contract.
Agreed. A
Yes.
big thanks to the bargaining team from 795. And, yeah, looking forward to another great year next year.
And happy it's a 3-year.
Yes.
Yes, for sure.
That gives us a lot of stability. I mean, those of us who've been on the board for a while were here when we would have like a 1-year extension or a rollover, and that's very challenging. So 3 years, thank you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Gaynor?
Ms. Crenshaw,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Ms. Serini,
Yes.
Mr. Trimble.
Yes.
All right, and the next is a resolution to approve tentative agreement between Cleveland Heights, University Heights City School Board of Education, and Ohio Association of Public School Employees, OPSI Local 102, effective July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2028.
May I have a motion to consider this resolution, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments? I'm glad it's done, I'm glad it's done, I'm glad it's done. And
it's
before the
3-year.
end of the current contract.
Yes, copy paste.
Yep,
Copy-
copy
yeah.
paste for the
All the
next,
comments.
yeah.
Mr. Gaynor?
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Ms. Serini,
Yes.
Mr. Trimble.
Yes.
Ms. Crenshaw,
Yes.
All right, next resolution to approve the tentative agreement between the Cleveland Heights, University Heights City Board of Education and Ohio Association of Public School Employees, OPSI Local 617, effective July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2028.
May I have a motion to consider this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Uh-oh.
Jinx.
Flip a coin.
More comments? The same?
Same.
Ibid?
Here, here.
Yep. Mr. Gaynor?
Ms. Serini,
Yes.
Mr. Trimble.
Yes.
Ms. Crenshaw,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
All right, next, resolution to approve tentative agreement between the Cleveland Heights, University Heights City School Board of Education and Educational Administrative and Professional Staff Council, EAPSC, effective July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2028.
May I have a motion to consider this resolution?
I motion we consider the resolution.
I second.
And again, we got it done, and everybody worked very hard to get to where we are today, so thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Ms. Crenshaw,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Ms. Serini,
Yes.
Mr. Trimble.
Yes.
And finally, resolution to approve tentative agreement between Cleveland Heights, University Heights City School Board of Education and the Monitors Unit, effective July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2028.
May I have a motion to consider this resolution, please?
So moved.
Second.
Is this where we get up on the tables and dance? Yay, wahoo! Okay, this is... Mr. Gaynor?
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Ms. Serini,
Yes.
Mr. Trimble.
Yes.
Ms. Crenshaw,
Yes.
So we are incredibly grateful to everybody who participated in these negotiations. There was a level of respect and cordiality and a willingness to work together to get it done, and it shows. So thank you, Dr. Lombardo, for
Absolutely.
leading this.
And I
No
believe
problem.
this is your last meeting, Dr. Lombardo, until you go into your next position as a superintendent of Geneva.
Yes, yeah, tomorrow will be my last day.
Oh, my goodness.
So I just want to thank you. This is a great way to end a long and hard-working career in the district, and just want to thank you officially for the record for your contribution and work here in the district and your leadership.
Well, it's been my pleasure to serve, and I do want to thank the board, Liz and Scott. It's been an awesome 12 years, and I'll be a Tiger for the rest of my life. So I really,
Once a tiger,
Always
always
a
a tiger.
but I appreciate the support and allowing me to grow. And it's been an amazing. It's going to be hard to leave tomorrow. It really will be for me.
Oh, goodness.
But thank you.
But bigger and better things.
Yeah,
Well, Geneva's lucky to have you.
I appreciate that, Jody. Thank
They
you.
really will be lucky.
So next, I believe, it's Mr. Gaynor's turn.
Yes, budget presentation.
Joe.
I promise we'll be quick. And fortunately, this is a similar presentation. You know, we've been around this block before, so everyone's seen this. The documents are all similar, just the numbers are slightly different. So we'll go through the presentation, and as you have any questions along the way, please feel free to jump in and ask those. So again, CHUH Strategic Plan, Goal 5, Operational Resources, ensuring that we have the necessary finances for student outcomes. So tonight, again, quickly, we'll go through just a quick introduction, which we're doing now. The budget process, we'll talk a little bit about, and remind you how that goes. Fiscal year 26 general fund budget, show how that ties to the 5-year forecast, and then ask for your approval of the temporary appropriations for the upcoming school year. So we're here in June. We're both trying to get this fiscal year closed and get everything ready for the next fiscal year to start on July 1st. So, and it's made all the trickier by the fact that, the state biennial budget is not in place, but also our federal grants are all over the place. So the state is implementing a new system. Liz and I got an email from Laura Bates today, who attended a training where they're just saying, right now, just put something in, the system,
Something.
ODEW is not, they don't know, they don't have the allocations from the feds yet. We rely on those grant funds to pay staff starting July 1, and we don't start doing that until the grants are substantially approved. So, we're having some issues trying to work through all of that, but we have what we have been told to put in place, and we're going to work from there. So I just give you a little forewarning. Don't be surprised if maybe we have to try to pull a quorum on June 30th. So Monday, we might have to do that, but we think we have everything in place, at least as we know it needs to be at this point in time. So. But it's definitely frustrating, in particular as it relates to grant funds, trying to know what we have available to spend and how to budget for that and allocate for that. So as part of that introduction, just a reminder, and we've talked about this in our 3 things before, we have an accounting structure that we're mandated to use by the state. It has all the various dimensions that include departments and functions and operational units and objects, which would be like supplies and materials or professional development or those kinds of things. So each of those components and dimensions means something different, and that way we're able to pull reports and track data based on those summaries, which those different dimensions, which also roll up. So you can do summaries. Like if I want to know the cost of X at all elementary schools, those kinds of things roll up in such a way and are designed in such a way that we can get at that data. The USAS manual, and this will be a big project for finance and for Angel next year. We talked about in the last 3 things where the auditor state has decided to update the USAS manual and mandate certain special cost centers within the general fund to track DPIA and student wellness and success funds and all those things that they give us as part of the state funding that they want to see. We can run reports and show how we spent the money. They want to mandate that it all be contained in a special cost center. The problem is that the accounting structure as it exists in our financial system won't accommodate what they want and how they've designed it to be. So that's going to be a whole big project next year, is to try to figure out with our A-site, how do we make this happen to meet the needs of the state and what the legislature is demanding versus what the software will allow. So that's going to be a big one. So I'm sure Angel will come to you with that as one of her major goals for next year. But at least at this point in time, we have everything that we need, and everything is working the way we intend it to be, and everything is similar. There were a few things that they phased out that they asked us to get rid of right away, but those are things that really that we weren't using to begin with at Heights. So the budget process, and this is a graphic that Eric put together. It kind of works counterclockwise. And remember, this is the general fund budget we're talking about. So as a reminder, the grant funds, this budget document that you have in front of you, this is all general fund. This is what ties to the 5-year forecast, which will show you that this is what the appropriations are. But the appropriation, you're also appropriating for all other funds. But when we're talking about this process, we're talking about the general fund only. So we send budget documents out in the early spring to all budget leaders. Give them, and the whole process is laid out in the budget document itself. We ask them to complete that zero-based budgeting, so we do provide allocation and history so that they can see what they've spent. But then we, kind of ask them to use that as a guideline, but really start with zero and return a budget to us based on your needs for the next school year. And Phil, you will appreciate the fact that we did take your advice from last year, and in terms of allocating additional money at the elementaries, based on what we give a per pupil allocation at the building level. So it was different amounts for the elementaries, for the high school, or middle school and then high school levels. And so what we did to differentiate at the elementary level was looked at the Title I funding and grouped those buildings accordingly, and then gave those buildings that had higher Title I allocations and therefore likely greater need for additional resources, additional per pupil.
Wonderful.
spending.
Thank you.
That's why Noble looks the way it does.
Yes.
Okay.
So then we go through a review process where everyone returns their budgets. We look at that to make sure that everything's coded properly, that things aren't, that nothing looks awry. If people ask for additional money outside of what their allocation is, we speak to Liz about that, and try to decide, whether we're going to approve that or whether we'll, try to find another source to fund those kinds of things or delay a purchase or something like that. Then Eric creates this budget document that you have before you, and then we bring it to you for approval, as we're doing tonight. So the general fund budget, again, just a reminder, we're talking about general fund only, so that's a link in the presentation to this document electronically. It goes through and actually shows by building and by department what everyone has submitted in terms of their budget requests. And then, underneath all of this, there are just layers and layers of additional detail. But this is kind of a summary level by object that shows you, this building or this department is asking for this much in professional development versus supplies and materials or electronics, whatever they might be asking for. So, and I'll direct your attention to the last two pages. So pages 72 and 73 is really the overall summary of the general fund budget, and you see the total general fund budget for the year at $123,083,340. So first, I'll reference here on this slide. Again, this serves as an initial resource and a guide for all the budget managers. It does highlight the budget process and has links to Ohio Revised Code and board policy in terms of budgeting and all that good stuff. But that $123 million is important. Well, and then again, we have a sample from, this is Human Resources budget since Paul's here, and it's his last day. We used his budget as an example for what that looks like in the budget document itself. But wanted to make sure that you could see that what you're approving ties to the 5-year forecast. So, I've given you a hard copy as well, but the link here will go directly to that forecast history where you'll see the 5-year forecast, and I've highlighted for fiscal '26 the budget of $123,083,340. So the budget document and all the detail that is therein ties up to the 5-year forecast of $123,083,340. And then that ultimately you'll see in the third and final document that I have for you, the temporary appropriations for general fund. I've highlighted again that $123 million. So you can see that everything lines up with what we're asking for versus the 5-year forecast and also the budget document itself. The temporary appropriation document that you're looking at, and there's a link in here to that as well, has every other fund and the appropriations that we're asking for there. With the other funds, like I say, you're seeing some round numbers in some cases because these are strictly estimates at this point. These are temporary appropriations that we're asking for to start the year out. A lot of districts will go, and we used to do this at one point, just ask for 25% of the prior year as a starting point for a temporary appropriation. Either way, we've tried to, in recent years, be a little more accurate in terms of what we think the actual final appropriations will be. So this is close. There will be adjustments based on the union contracts that were approved, that you've approved tonight. So now, once we have actual numbers as we wind up this fiscal year, and then those new negotiated agreements, the 5-year forecast will change. It always does. That's why we bring it to you every month. But those changes will be embedded, and then when Angel brings you the permanent appropriations in September, again, she'll line that up to the 5-year forecast, and you'll see how that's all changed there.
Between now and September,
Yes.
how much change is there usually between?
Typically, there's not much, but with union contracts, so all the contracts that have been settled, so there will absolutely be changes related to that, and then there will potentially be changes based on what happens with the biennial budget, which we'll know hopefully tomorrow what that's going to look like. But so that could affect this in some way. It will probably certainly affect the forecast. It may not affect the appropriations as much, but it will affect the forecast and the revenue side of things. Because we, and again, we always ask the board to appropriate at the fund level. So these are just budgets for spending. So you're really not appropriating revenue. But the revenues in the 5-year forecast and the biennial budget could change that. So which would then change your whole forecast, which then might result in you making different decisions or saying, well, then we need to dial the appropriations back a little bit, so it could result in some changes to the appropriations, but really, this is the budget for next year as it stands and what we know it to be. So 123 million in general fund, 172 all funds. And again, remember that the all funds, that's, your bond retirement fund for your debt, 002, you'll see your permanent improvement fund, food services there, your self-insurance fund is in that number, $24 million. So that's why that looks so high comparatively, in terms of that versus the general fund. So any questions I can answer about, to your point, Malia, that you mentioned earlier, yes, the majority, and I know we've talked about this before, this is one of those things where we spend a lot of time on this part of the general fund budget, but 80% of the budget is staffing. So really, you've already set the majority of the budget through the approvals that you've made of new staff along the way. And so that's kind of the easy part for us in finance. But this is all the stuff that all those other accounts and all those other expenditures, it's a lot of time for a much smaller portion of the budget, but that's the way it goes. So everything is consistent in terms of percentages, as they typically are. Roughly 80% of the budget is salary and benefits, and then your other areas as well.
Right. And this is all an enormous amount of work that goes into preparing something which at the end we can't control what the state does, right? I mean, the foundation program is our second, maybe our third largest source of revenue after property taxes, right? Because and the property taxes, that's what, 75% of our budget, and that we can predict fairly closely what's going to come in. But what comes from the state is a little insane because we don't know what they're doing.
Well, and we're hopeful that the forecast itself won't change significantly based on any of the inside millage proposals that have been out there. That seems to have died, so we're hopeful that won't be a problem. Otherwise, that's $7.5 million a year for us, right? That just would go away, and so that's just kind of inconceivable. So, and I think that other entities who, I had a call from a city council member just this week, and it was a question about inside millage, and just knowing that other entities get inside millage as well, and I think everyone kind of came together and said, this is not the way to provide property tax relief to homeowners. by getting rid of inside millage that every entity relies on, from your libraries to the park system to, your school districts, even though we have the majority of that.
And municipal government is also,
Absolutely, and
Dependent
in many
on
ways,
inside
times,
millage,
that's how
yeah.
they fund their pensions for police and fire. So,
oh boy, not a good look.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
yeah, so hopefully that won't happen. The cash balance issue, as long as they keep it at 50 or even 40%, we're good. If they force this 30% situation, that could be problematic. And I've also, in one of the iterations, they were kind of punting it back to the county and saying, oh, well, each county can decide whether or not they really want to enforce that, which could be ugly. And we know some counties are way more into that than others. And Cuyahoga County not so much, but that could be
Even-
problematic.
Even if our district would be okay with a 50% cash balance cap, there are plenty of school districts all over the state who would be decimated by that.
I think I heard, I was on a call with, that Fleeter was on, and he said that I think that affects half of the
Yeah.
districts. Even at 50%, that affects half. So if we were in a
where
different
is
point
that
in the
money
levy
to
cycle,
educate kids in Ohio
Yeah.
going to come from?
would be bad.
Yeah.
And then just a reminder that in the 5-year forecast, we have never anticipated any additional fair school funding for this biennium. So, if they give us nothing, the forecast remains as it is. And if they give us, something which is
will
highly
be
unlikely
happy.
at this point, but that will be all to the good.
Yeah.
Which, again, has happened in the past, the last 2 biennial budgets, at this point in time, we would have anticipated 0, because that's the conservative approach to take. And then, as you know, we kind of ran into that where people will then look back at a previous forecast and say, oh my gosh, look how far off the forecast is based on what actually happened. Well, depends on at what point in time you're looking, and that's why we update the forecast every time something becomes known that's substantive, so that, if people are actually watching as time goes on, they can see the evolution of that versus looking at now, now versus 5 years ago and saying, well, gosh, that's really far off what happened. Well, 4 years of fair school funding happened, and COVID happened, and so the ESSER money that we received happened, and that kind of stuff.
Well, thank Eric for putting this document together. The artwork is wonderful that he
excellent.
included.
It's so nice to see
Also,
children's art.
the explanation of the budget process is really transparent and straightforward, and so I appreciate that as well. I was wondering why the elementary budgets were a little different. Phil, thank
There we
you
go.
for adding that tidbit to our financial process.
Yeah, absolutely. And as those things come up, if there's anything that, anyone sees, I'm sure, and Angel as well would want to hear any feedback, because that, when you brought that up, Phil, it was like, yeah, that's
Makes sense.
right. I think in our mind it was always, well, there are other services that are, and other sources of funding that we're trying to address, issues in the buildings, that's why some buildings have more title funding than others, and others have additional resources in terms of staffing. But even from the non-salary perspective, it made sense to do that, so.
It's nice to provide true legal equity in our school district whenever possible.
There we go, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, I also did love the art, and I sent a text message to Mr. Rossi, whose daughter Margot is one of the artists. So I said,
Oh, I didn't realize
yeah,
that.
so I said,
I guess I should look more
I said-
closely at the names.
said your
Oh, yeah.
your daughter has a very prestigious publication credit.
There we go. Yeah, and we,
As a kindergartner.
well, and what we do, and Sandra Clark, my admin and finance, she actually, at the beginning of every year reaches out to Toya, who then reaches out to every building and collects art as the programs start each year. And we include student art in the comprehensive report or in the budget report or anything we can to kind of, bring it back to why we're here.
It does remind us of why we do this.
Absolutely,
It's
yes.
important.
Wonderful
Absolutely.
grounding.
Otherwise, it's just a bunch of numbers and it's boring.
Well, yeah, people's eyes glaze over if it's more
Yes,
than
it is.
25 cents. So, thank you.
Yes, so we would ask for your approval of the temporary appropriations tonight. And then, as I said, then the permanents will be coming your way in September.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the temporary appropriations for fiscal year 2026?
I move that we approve the temporary appropriations for fiscal year '26.
Second.
Mr. Gaynor, will you call the roll?
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Ms. Serini,
Yes.
Mr. Trimble,
Yes.
Ms. Crenshaw.
Yes.
How many years left on our bond?
A lot.
Many.
Okay, thanks. I just
'Cause
look
it
at that and I
was-
I feel like wishful thinking. Could we just make it go away?
No,
that a-
I think because we did refinance it, so.
It's a lot less than
Started
it used to
over.
be.
But it's less money, but still a similar term, so
Fine.
there's probably at least a good 20 to 25 years left on that.
Okay.
Because was that originally a 35-year bond?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, well, I just look at that number and go, it'd be nice to see that go away.
Yes.
So, wonderful. Any other business before this meeting? Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
A motion, we adjourn.
I second.
Mr. Gaynor?
Ms. Serini,
Yes.
Mr. Trimble.
Yes.
Ms. Crenshaw,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
you.